Hey, Hawkeye fans, Chad Leistikow with Tyler Tachman. Earlier pod than usual today at Hawk Central. Tyler was in Iowa City on his own today, so we're going to lean heavily on him for football talk. I'll have the basketball game in Omaha later, leaving right after this to make the 1 hour and 45-minute drive. Tyler, give us a quick overview of the biggest things you learned today before we get to our three topics.
I guess the kind of newsy things were just Jay Higgins, Quinn Schulte, Logan Lee. They're going through senior day festivities, but still undecided about whether they could possibly return next season to Iowa. So those decisions still up in the air, it seems. But that was to me just kind of like the brief, quick kind of news. And probably Jay's the biggest one that you like. If he comes back next season for Iowa, that's just a massive lift because of how good he's been. But I think Quinn Schulte, who probably doesn't get as much credit as he deserves, on the back end of the defense, him coming back as well would, certainly be significant.
Yeah, I had our first topic today to talk about kind of these 20 seniors that are going to go through the ceremony, and that'll dovetail into the Illinois matchup, which obviously follows that. But let's start where you just started, which is guys that could come back. I mean, I think having been through, I don't know, 8 or 9 or 10 of these in a row, like where you do the senior week interviews, most guys have gotten to the point now where they don't want to be a distraction. They don't want to be a headline. So they're not going to say, I'm coming back, I'm definitely coming back or I'm definitely leaving, unless it's like painfully obvious. And I think Tory Taylor, from what it sounded like, made it sound like he's probably going through his last game as a Hawkeye. I mean, it was a lot to come back this year for him. Makes sense. But yeah, let's start with Jay Higgins. I mean, to me, he's proven enough. I'd be surprised if he comes back, but just because he has had such a great year, he stayed healthy. You would think his stock is as high as it could be for the next level. Logan Lee is interesting though because he's married. He got married in the off season. So what does his wife prefer him to do? Like that's a collective decision. It's not just a selfish decision. Maybe they want to stay in Iowa City another year. Maybe he's ready to try to make $700,000 a year instead of 30,000 in NIL money. And then Quinn Schulte, the other one you brought up, would make the most sense, I think, to come back of that group you mentioned, just because just very similar example. Jack Kerner a couple years ago, he did make that jump with the opportunity to come back with a sixth year. He got a shot, didn't make it. Now he's doing other stuff. He's coaching with the Hawkeyes now. But that said, you wonder if that story might impact Quinn. Say, hey, it's pretty awesome here. I would like to stay for my sixth year. Three different stories there between those three guys.
And I know, like with Jay, is I feel like the evaluation process for the NFL can just kind of be like enigmatic in terms of sometimes it doesn't make sense because it's a lot based on potential and measurables and all this type of stuff. So I don't know where Jay stacks up in that kind of projection, but it's pretty clear that he is one of the best linebackers, if not the best linebacker in the country this season. And maybe where he doesn't have as much of a, I don't know, advantage as other guys is that if you look at a guy like Peyton Wilson at NC State, like he's been a known commodity for a while, and this is his first season really bursting onto the national scene, which wasn't really all of his fault because he was playing behind Jack Campbell. But if he wanted to continue to prove himself, or possibly some of it could just hinge on what happens at the end of this season. How does Iowa finish the season? Do they end up getting to the Big Ten championship, as it seems like they are, but it's not certain? And I also wonder, NIL is definitely another factor in this of possibly keeping guys around for longer, and also just of like where they are in life. You mentioned Logan Lee being married. Like, does he feel like, he's moving on, he's ready to move on to the next phase of his life? Or, does Quinn Schulte feel like he still has more to give at Iowa? So I think where these guys are in their particular walks of life, NIL, where they project at the next level, I think are all worth just taking into account when they have to make that decision.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up NIL because, that's the type of thing where it's completely legal now to, maybe not in these words, but like if you stay, uh, there's some business is gonna make you a spokesman next year for $150,000. I mean, I'm just making up numbers, but you know, that's real money that potentially you could quote unquote cash in on. So, yeah, it's the old blueprint of trying to figure these things out isn't necessarily um, the same. And yeah, I'm glad we're talking about this. I hadn't planned on like delving into it this much, but it's interesting. Now, here's another guy that here's another two guys that I think are really interesting decisions who are fifth year seniors would be Eric All. You guys did not get to talk to him, correct, today? Obviously, because he's hurt. And then Sebastian Castro, both fifth year seniors. Um, I don't know what the NFL evaluation would be on Sebastian Castro. I don't know what it would be on Eric All. I mean, potentially both guys could really up their stock by coming back, especially Eric All. Like if Luke Lachey goes, Eric All stays, or maybe it ends up being vice versa. Who knows? Maybe they come back as a package deal. Maybe they both go. Very interesting. Any thoughts on those two guys?
It felt like Eric All, the way that he was playing after Luke Lachey got hurt, like he was pretty clearly trending to being drafted in the NFL, just the level that he was playing at. And the fact that, I mean, his athleticism, his kind of dynamic playability at tight end, I felt like would have been a real asset in the NFL. And it almost feels like you get an extra boost just from being a tight end at Iowa. Like there's just the pedigree, the fact that people know that Iowa tight ends have succeeded at a high level in the NFL. And Castro, I want to put this on the record now, but I think he's going to have a really good game against Illinois. It feels like he's been kind of quiet, like the last few games, like because he had the pick six against Iowa State, and then he had another pick a little bit later. It feels like he's kind of been. Didn't he also have the one against, was it Michigan State? Or I feel like
he clinched it against Wisconsin.
Okay, yeah. But it feels like he's been kind of quiet the last few weeks. Like we haven't so I feel like he's gonna break through on Saturday. But yeah, he's another guy that, if he decides to stay, that it feels like there's even another gear for him to get better if he stays and to, make a jump that someone like Jay Higgins made to this season, where he becomes probably like one of the best defenders in the Big Ten in the nation.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to underclassmen yet, but potentially, I mean, if you look at the Iowa back five, the secondary, all five of them have a decision to make. Cooper DeJean, is projected to be a first rounder. I would think he would go, but he's an Iowa kid and he's only been here 3 years. He's really only played 2 years in full. So you never know, especially with NIL. But first round money and opportunity beyond the money is different. But still, he really loves playing at Iowa, and I'm sure loves hearing Coop and all that stuff. There's a lot of factors that go into this. So Castro, I guess Wampa does not have a decision make. He'll be back. But the other name back there is Jermari Harris. He's a fifth-year senior, did not play last year. Definitely has another year. Actually could stay 2 more years, assuming he got a medical for last year, which I'm sure he would. So he's got a decision to make too. I kind of would guess he'd be leaning towards staying just because he's probably got more to prove, if he wants to be an NFL draft pick. It doesn't mean he can't make that jump. Matt Hankins kind of made the similar decision to come back and have a full 50-year senior year in 2021. Got a chance with the Falcons. So I don't know. Jermari Harris is another one where we're outlining these guys because as Hawkeye fans, we want you to know that this could be their last game, but it might not be their last game.
And
Kinnick.
And another dynamic to this is with the transfer portal now, like you kind of have to you can't wait till forever to make a decision, because you have to be cognizant of the fact that Iowa has to know that if Cooper or Jermari isn't coming back, that they have to plan accordingly, potentially dipping into the transfer portal or, whatever. But I think the good thing about the situation with Jermari or Cooper is that even if one of the two come back, I feel really good about Deshaun Lee back there from what he showed in those first two games with Jermari out. He seems like a young guy that has a lot of promise. Just after Jermari came back from that suspension, he hasn't really gotten a lot of time on defense, but I think you feel really good about him. And also, I'll just mention too, just one guy that doesn't have a decision to make is Nico Ragaini. But just talking to him today, like I'm gonna miss covering him. He's just when we've interacted with him, just like super open, super transparent. I think back to after that non-call against Iowa State, and he was dropping F-bombs the following media week and got the public reprimand from the Big Ten. So maybe he's a little bit too honest, to a fault at some points. But it was today, comparing what it was, the vibe of everything, to what it was 2 weeks ago when the Brian Ferentz news had just dropped. Kirk Ferentz says players are not talking. They had just lost in just gutting fashion to Minnesota. Like, it's a night and day difference between the vibe then and the vibe now. Like today, just very lighthearted, positive. Guys seem to be in a good mood. There were some emotions flowing with senior day, but it's crazy to think just how much the energy being around there has changed in just 2 weeks. Because 2 weeks ago, when Kirk Ferentz was addressing the media right after it had been announced that his son wouldn't be coming back after the season, it just felt really tight, really tense. At this point, it basically feels like the exact opposite.
Yeah, some guys that definitely are playing besides Nico, that are playing their last game here. Rusty Feth, he's out of eligibility. Nick Jackson out of eligibility after this year. I believe there's one more. Well, Noah Shannon and Steve Stylianos, all those guys, cannot return. There's Dejon Parker also, I believe, is out of eligibility after this year. So the other two guys that I think can come back, which will be interesting, both former walk-ons from the state of Iowa, Nick DeYoung, offensive lineman, and linebacker Kyler Fisher. Now, I assume Iowa would want them back. That is another part of this equation. I mean, they have to have a spot for you, a scholarship for you, unless you want to come back as a walk-on. But I would think of those guys, I would think Kyler Fisher would have a really good shot at being welcomed back, want to come back, to maybe, I don't want to say he won't have probably the same impact as a Jay Higgins, but to potentially compete for a starting inside linebacker job, or even just keep the same job as he had this year in the 4-3 and just be, a little bit more of a, maybe a little bit more of an impact player. I don't know. Those two guys are, maybe you don't think about them much, but also you might be thankful that they stay if they stay.
I think Kyler Fisher is one of the more undervalued guys. And on a defense that doesn't have Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson, he's probably a starting linebacker, but those guys are just so good that, he's behind them. But I think he's a guy that if he does decide to come back next season, could be huge in potentially filling Jay Higgins' absence if he leaves, or Nick Jackson. He's been around the program for a while, kind of had that steady, gradual development, almost like in a way very similar to Jay Higgins. And yeah, like you said, I don't think it would be fair to say like he is going to become Jay Higgins or anything, but it feels like the trajectory of his career is very similar to one like that, where he could get, he could break out. And the fact that he's also been able to watch so many good linebackers over his time at Iowa, between Jack Campbell, Seth Benson, and now Jay Higgins, Nick Jackson, like there's also just like value in being around guys that do it at such a high level.
And just one last factor that popped into my head. I mean, with these linebackers, both Higgins and Fisher, if Seth Wallace takes a DC job somewhere else, which I think is it's gotta happen at some point. Do they, not that they would still have Phil Parker presumably, but would that impact their decision too? If something like that were to happen. So lots of factors go on here. And bottom line is, this is a pretty awesome senior class. It'd be pretty cool to see Noah Shannon walk out there, Torrey Taylor walk out there. It's going to be a pretty emotional day, Tyler. And with that, there's a game to play about 5 to 8 minutes after that ceremony, as Kirk Ferentz said, to get their stuff together, I think is what he said in the press conference. I've seen this before. It can go one way or another. They've had some really flat senior days. Obviously, last year against Nebraska did not go well. There were some other extenuating factors. 2017 at home against Purdue was kind of a disaster. Lost that one against a pretty inferior team at home, 24, next to last game of the year, 24-15. Give me a sense of what you felt from the players today about their focus for this game. Iowa just a 3.5 point favorite against the Illini.
Joe Evans also brought up that Nebraska game from last season, basically saying that he's going to try to put away the emotions of senior day as much as he can, because he saw how bad it can go if that doesn't happen like it did against Nebraska. So I think being able to balance those emotions, is definitely going to be a storyline to follow. But I think if they obviously they're in the driver's seat of the Big Ten West, and it seems likely they're going to make the Big Ten championship, but it's not certain. I just think that you have to take advantage of this opportunity and just close it out at Kinnick. You can't allow it to go to Nebraska and let weird things happen, because this season has just been all over the place, and it feels like at some points it's inevitable for something weird to happen. I think that Iowa just has to totally eliminate that opportunity. You have a chance to secure your bid to the Big Ten championship in front of Kinnick, or in Kinnick Stadium on Senior Day. It's like a perfect ending, or not ending, but perfect chapter to be able to get to the Big Ten championship. If you can't do it, on Saturday, then that just opens the door to a bunch of drama that could be avoided. But I think with the emotions of it all, like the way that this team has responded over and over this season, it feels like they'll be able to handle it, whether that be, the call against Cooper DeJean that wiped away the punt return, whether that be the Brian Ferentz news, whether that be the Penn State game, the gambling investigation. It feels like this team has shown an ability to deal with adversity, to overcome it, to balance their emotions and still produce. So that gives optimism that they can, close it out on Saturday.
We will get into the details of the matchup with our Wednesday Hawk Central radio show. One day away from that. But Tyler, what about, I saw some video interviews with Deacon Hill from today. I'm sure that was a topic. It sounded like someone asked Kirk about him. I don't know if he really answered the question, but how did he sound after kind of the best game of his career? And obviously it seems like they're going to have to put more on his shoulders with Illinois having a lot of run stuffers up front.
Yeah, I mean, I think I didn't spend a ton of time talking to him, but he kind of seemed pretty even keeled, to the point where that he has been the entire season, which I think is good, because not necessarily letting one good performance get to your head, not allowing himself to get too bumpy of a road. So, but I think it was one that he can definitely draw confidence off of. It was one that he can build off of, because it was a lot of what he had lacked, up to this point this season, where he got into a rhythm. It seemed like for the first time this season, he was comfortable in the pocket. It was one where you look at finally being able to get kind of tangible results on the field. And it was like without Deontay Vines, without Steve Stilianos. So like for an already depleted offense, there were even more guys out. And I think that's where the emergence of Caleb Brown too has become important. Do you look at those two guys as a potentially kind of dynamic, I wouldn't say duo, but connection that can really continue to grow? Two younger guys that can continue to grow on this back half of the season. So I think for the offense as a whole, not just Deacon, it's like that was one good performance. Now, do they revert back to their old self? Like, was that just an aberration, or can they continue to build off of it?
A couple little injury tidbits. It sounded like Steve Stylianos, as you mentioned, will be back this week. That could be really huge. Iowa goes 2 tight end sets a lot. Addison Ostrenga emerging. To have him and Stylianos on the field at the same time, you would think would be a plus. No slight to Johnny Pascuzzi or Zach Ortworth, but you get a little bit more experience out there at tight end this week, and then maybe a little bit more confidence with Nico playing 66 snaps against Rutgers and Caleb Brown playing 60. I mean, those guys logged heavy time out there and looked good. I mean, I would just keep them out there at this point. I mean, those 4 guys plus a running back seem like a good combination to me. But and then Logan Jones, not on the depth chart, but also Ferentz said today, he didn't address it sounded like specifically, but he said, have a chance for all those guys that are hurt, right? Any other injury wrinkles I'm leaving out before I get to the next thing I want to talk about?
I don't think. I don't know if you said Vines. He said it's very unlikely.
Okay, yeah, right. Bo Stevens also out. One guy that will be on the field, not going through senior day ceremonies, but is a factor on this team, but is leaving the team, is Spencer Petras. And I know you didn't cover Spencer, Tyler, but I saw you tweeted some quotes about Spencer today from talking to Nico. I wrote about Spencer, so check that out at hawkcentral.com. It's online now. He has entered the transfer portal, which I wrote this, but it's just funny that people are surprised at this. It's like he wants to play another year. Iowa has plans, and his shoulder has been rehabbed, and now he can go play somewhere for his 7th year. So good luck to him for sure. I know you didn't cover him. I guess you probably watched him from afar, covering Indiana, though. So any thoughts on, the impact that Spencer Petras has had? And I liked what Nico said today about, I think he's gotten maybe whatever he said, a bad shake from Hawkeye fans.
I'll read a quote that Nico said that I thought was pretty telling. He said of what Spencer will bring to wherever he plays next. He said, someone with a lot of experience, someone who's played in the Big Ten championship, and what I think most importantly is someone who's one of the best leaders I've ever been around. Spencer is a person who pushed me and got on me in my younger days because he wanted to see me succeed, which is something I'll be forever thankful for. He puts in countless hours every week. I feel like he got it rough here from the fans when it wasn't rightfully deserved. He's one of the greatest teammates I've ever had. So that was pretty high praise from Nico. And I think there's value in what he has done this season for a guy like Deacon Hill, because Deacon Hill mentioned him after the Rutgers game as someone who Deacon Hill has obviously been the target of criticism. Spencer Petras knows exactly what it's like to be in those shoes. So to be able to help him through that. And then a lot of what Nico said just kind of makes you feel like there's the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that fans don't necessarily see, all the value in that. Because obviously what he does on, the field on game days was really important, but just the leadership aspect of it and the way that, he maybe help guys behind the scenes, is important to what he brings to the table as well.
I think I heard my daughter just get home from school, so you never know. We could get another cameo.
We can have a surprise guest.
We could. We've got about 5 minutes to see if we will. Good stuff on Spencer. Yeah, I know him well enough to know that he would not be happy that this kind of came out this week, but it's kind of unavoidable. But you have to enter the portal to, that's just the way it works. You can't not enter, so he has to enter so other teams can talk to him. And presumably he'll be on someone's campus in January, learning their system, getting ready to be a 7th-year senior quarterback for that team. So it'll be very interesting to watch. Who knows? Maybe Brian Ferentz will be his position coach. Wouldn't that be something? Let's talk a little hoops, Tyler. Iowa at Creighton tonight. I realize the shelf life on this is short, so we'll keep it brief. Hawkeyes at Creighton, 9 o'clock tonight. Fox Sports 1, I believe, right? Fox. I can't remember what network it's on.
Yeah, I think it's
on TV. It's the Gavitt Games. Hawks are 12.5-point underdogs, Tyler. What do you make of tonight's matchup?
First, I got to say, tip-offs after 9 p.m. Central should be illegal. That's just, That's brutal. On a weekday? No. Okay. Anyways, I'm interested to see the guys that Iowa expected to be major contributors, that being a Peyton Sanford, Ben Krikke, Tony Perkins, Patrick McCaffrey. They have all delivered against lower level, 2 games of lower level competition. Can they sustain that against a team like Creighton? Perceived as a potential Final Four contender. They had a really good season last season. They're bringing back Baylor Shireman, Ryan Kalkbrenner. Like, they're just a really dynamic offense. Can that translate to much better competition? And then on the flip side of things, Iowa's freshmen and younger guys coming off the bench. What do they look like? They've looked really good in two again lower level games. Owen Freeman was freshman of the week, for his performances last week. Can they continue that against better competition? I think that kind of just speaks for this Iowa team as a whole. Is through the first 2 games, they've looked about as good as they possibly could have. They've won by a combined 43 points in 2 games, but that was against lower level competition. What does that look like when they stack up against one of the best teams in the nation? I'm interested to see how that'll play out. If they lose, I don't think Iowa really has much to lose. If they lose, it was expected. If they hang in there and put up a fight, I think it gives reason to believe that this team might be maybe better than what was originally perceived at the beginning of the season, from the outside at least. So it'll just be an interesting test to see where they stack up.
Yes, Fox Sports 1 is correct. And it's a 9:11 p.m. tip. And James Allen, who's the men's basketball SID this year, says it could be a 5-minute push for TV. So it could be 9:16 p.m.
Well, it's like a 5-minute push turns into another 5-minute push and then an hour-long push. Next thing you know, we're starting it at 12 a.m.
I think 9:16 is the drop dead, but post game won't be over until midnight probably. So that's why I'm kind of getting the late start heading to Omaha here. We'll be doing that soon. But one thing I have written on my notes, last thing, is really the ball handling has been really impressive. And I asked Fran McCaffrey about that yesterday. Only 13 turnovers this year, Tyler, in 152 possessions, which for a fast-paced team and having young ball handlers, DeSante Bowen, Josh Dix, Brock Harding, I'm impressed with that, but I'm also curious to see if that can continue. Also impressed with Peyton Sanford's rebounding so far. He is the leading rebounder on the team at over 10 per game.
It should be an Iowa's defense for a program that's obviously been a struggle. It's been pretty good the first 2 games, again, against not as good competition. Creighton is just a dynamic offense. There's a lot of parallels between Iowa and Creighton. They're built very similarly in terms of the way they play offensively, high-paced, lots of shooting, good athletes, typically not a ton of defense. So it could be in a game in the 80s or 90s possibly. But to see how Iowa's defense holds up against Creighton, because this might be the biggest challenge that Iowa's defense has all season. So just to see if it can hold up at all will be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if we mentioned, but Creighton is ranked 8th in the country, and they were a step away from the Final Four last year. I'm hearing a lot of clanging, dishes. Who knows what's going on upstairs? So I better wrap this up.
Head out of there.
I got to see what's going on. Yeah. But thanks, Tyler, for holding down the fort in Iowa City today, and we will talk tomorrow on Hawk Central. Thanks a lot.